My name is Antonio Villas-Boas. In 1957, I was a 23-year-old farmer living in Brazil. Life was simple, long days in the hot sun, working the fields with my family. But one night, while plowing under the moonlight, everything changed. It began with a light in the sky. At first, I thought it was a star, but stars don't move like that. This light shifted, drifting closer, pulsing brighter with each second. I stopped my tractor and stared. The glow grew stronger, and before I could react, it hovered directly above me. It wasn't a star, it was a craft, egg-shaped, glowing red, with light spinning along its body. Fear surged through me. I jammed the tractor into gear, desperate to escape, but the engine went dead. I was trapped. Then I saw them. Figures stepped out of the light. They were small, barely reaching my shoulders, but powerful. They wore tight gray suits, helmets covering their faces. I fought with everything I had, kicking, screaming, clawing, but it was useless. They dragged me toward the glowing craft, my cries vanishing into the night air. Inside, the walls glowed faintly, smooth and metallic, as if the entire ship was carved from one piece. The air was heavy, sharp with a chemical smell. They stripped me of my clothes and covered my body in a burning gel. My skin tingled and stung. Then came the needles, long, sharp. They pierced my chin, my arms, my legs. I could hear them speaking in low tones, a language I didn't understand. And then she entered. She was different from the others, taller, more human in appearance. Her hair was long and white blonde, her skin pale, almost glowing. Her eyes were piercing blue, cold but intelligent. Unlike the others, she wore very little clothing. Without words, I understood her intent. They pushed me toward her. I was weak, feverish, terrified, but unable to resist. What followed was something I still struggle to describe. When it was over, she pointed to her stomach, then up at the sky, as if to say, "Our child will not be born here." Her eyes locked onto mine, alien, unearthly, but filled with a meaning I'll never forget. The suited figures returned my clothes and led me back outside. The night air hit me like a wave. I stumbled into the field, watching as the craft lifted silently into the sky, shrinking to a red star. Some thought I'd gone mad. Others whispered that I had encountered something not of this world. I never stopped telling my story. I never changed it, not once. People called me a liar, a dreamer, a fool, but I stood by every word. And to this day I still see her eyes. That pale woman who pointed to her stomach, then to the stars. Was she carrying something of mine? Did she ever give birth among the stars? I will never know. But what I do know is that what happened to me was real. And I fear I was only one of many.
My name is Jim Weiner, and what I'm about to tell you is something that still keeps me awake some nights. People have called it the Allagash abductions, but for me, it was something much more personal, something that shook the way I understood reality itself. It all started in August of 1976. My brother Jack, our friends Charlie and Chuck Rack, and I decided to go on a camping trip deep into the Allagash wilderness of northern Maine. We were young, restless, and hungry for adventure. The four of us had all grown up in New England, and we'd heard stories about how vast and untouched the Allagash region was. Thick forests, quiet rivers, and nights so dark that the stars seemed to swallow the sky whole. It sounded like the perfect place to escape from the noise of the world. We spent the first couple of days canoeing down the Allagash River, fishing, swimming, and setting up camp wherever we pleased. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, and there was a kind of silence out there that you can't find anywhere else. Just the wind through the trees and the occasional call of a loon across the water. On the second night, something strange happened. We had set up camp on the riverbank, cooked our dinner, and were settling down when Charlie noticed a light in the distance. At first, we thought it was a plane or maybe even a searchlight from a ranger's boat, but as we watched, it became clear that this light wasn't moving like anything we knew. It hovered, then darted sharply, then hung in the air again. The four of us stood there, mesmerized. Eventually, it slipped behind the trees, and we tried to shrug it off. Just one of those weird things you can't explain. The following day, we hiked and fished like normal, but that night, well, that's the night that changed everything. We had set up camp along Eagle Lake, and after dinner, we decided to go night fishing. The moon was new, and the sky was pitch black. Without a fire, it was so dark that you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. To make sure we could find our way back, we built a huge bonfire on the shore. Its flames leapt high into the night sky, casting flickering light across the water. The four of us paddled out into the still, black lake, our canoes cutting softly through the water. The only sounds were the dip of the paddles and the distant crackle of our fire. I remember leaning back, staring up at the Milky Way, thinking how small and unimportant we must be compared to everything above us. Then Charlie spotted it again, the light. At first, it looked like a star, just brighter, larger. But as it grew, we realized it was moving. It hovered above the tree line, glowing with an intensity that lit up the water. Then, suddenly, it shot toward us. "Do you see that?" Jack whispered, his paddle frozen in midair. "I see it," I said, my stomach tightening. The light kept coming, closer and closer, until it was no longer just a light. It was a craft, a huge, glowing object, maybe the size of a house, with a strange, otherworldly brilliance. It hovered silently above the lake, its reflection shimmering on the water's surface. Panic set in. We started paddling furiously back to shore, our hearts pounding, the bonfire our only beacon. The light seemed to follow us, gliding smoothly above the water. I remember the overwhelming sensation of being watched, studied, like prey trying to escape a predator. And then everything went blank. The next thing I remember, we were on the shore, standing around the dying bonfire. Our canoes were pulled up, and we were just there. The fire had burned down far more than it should have, considering how large it had been when we left. Hours had passed, but none of us could explain what had happened in between. We didn't talk much about it that night. I think we were all too stunned, too afraid of sounding crazy, but there was a heaviness in the air, a silent agreement that something had happened to us, something we couldn't put into words. Over the next few days, we finished the trip, but things didn't feel the same. We were restless, uneasy. Each of us had strange dreams, vivid and unsettling. I dreamt of bright rooms, of beings with large eyes, of lying on a cold table unable to move. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. When I told Jack, he said he'd been having the same kind of dreams. Years passed. We went on with our lives, but the memory of that night never left us. Then, in the late 1980s, after I suffered a serious head injury in an accident, I began having seizures. My doctor suggested that stress and unresolved trauma might be triggering them. That's when I decided to undergo hypnosis therapy, hoping to get some answers. What came out during those sessions was worse than anything I had imagined. Under hypnosis, I remembered everything. The light, the panic, the moment the beam engulfed us and lifted us from the canoe. We weren't just missing time, we were taken. I saw the inside of the craft. The walls were smooth, glowing with a strange ambient light. There were figures there, beings unlike anything on Earth. Tall, thin, with spindly limbs and large, black, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to stare right through me. They didn't speak, but somehow, I could feel their thoughts pressing against mine. They laid me on a table. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. Cold instruments touched my skin. Something sharp pierced my arm. They were examining us, studying us like scientists would study a specimen. The strangest part was the feeling that they weren't trying to hurt us, at least not intentionally. But they had complete control and there was nothing we could do. I felt small, powerless, like a child in the hands of something far beyond my comprehension. When the hypnosis ended, I was shaking. The memories felt real, too real. And when we compared our sessions, the others had recalled the same thing. 4 grown men, all remembering the same abduction, the same beings, the same strange clinical procedures. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't imagination. It was real. Even now, decades later, I can still see their faces if I close my eyes. I can still feel the helplessness, the sense of being nothing more than an experiment. And I can still see that bonfire blazing on the shore of Eagle Lake, as if it were the last normal moment of my life. We went into the Allagash looking for adventure. What we found was something that would haunt us forever. And if you don't believe me, I understand. I wouldn't have believed it myself if it hadn't happened to me. But I know what I saw, I know what I experienced, and I know we were not alone on that lake.
My name is Linda Napolitano. For years, I've carried a story that still chills me when I think about it. People have called me a liar, others say I imagined it, but I know what happened. It was the night of November 30th, 1989. I was in my apartment in Manhattan, just a few blocks from the Brooklyn Bridge. I had gone to bed around 3 in the morning. Nothing unusual. The city was quiet outside. But sometime before dawn, I woke up suddenly. At first, I didn't understand why, then I saw it. Through my window, a bright blue-white light was shining. It wasn't like a street light or headlights. It was far too intense, almost like a spotlight cutting through the night. My body felt heavy, like I couldn't move. That's when I noticed 3 figures. They were standing at the end of my bed. They weren't human. Their skin was pale gray, almost translucent, with large black eyes that seemed to look straight into me. They didn't speak, not with words, but somehow I could hear them inside my mind. They told me not to be afraid. But I was terrified. Before I could scream, I felt myself being lifted. My body rose from the bed, and suddenly I was floating toward the window. I remember thinking, this can't be happening. I'll fall. But I didn't. I drifted right through the glass, like it wasn't even there. Outside, I was surrounded by that glowing blue light. The next thing I knew, I was being drawn toward a large, hovering craft above the city. It was massive, silent, and metallic, with lights that seemed to pulse like it was alive. I was taken aboard. Inside, I was placed on a table. The beings moved around me, touching me with their long, thin fingers. I couldn't move, but I could feel everything. They performed some kind of examination. Needles, instruments I didn't recognize. It was invasive, frightening. But there was also this strange sense that they had done it many times before, not just to me, but to others. And then, nothing. I woke up in my bed as if none of it had happened. But I knew it had. The strangest part is, I wasn't the only one who saw it. Later I learned that 2 men, government agents, had been near the Brooklyn Bridge that night. They saw me being taken from my apartment, floating up into the craft. They were witnesses. For years, I was haunted by the memories. Hypnosis brought even more details back. The light, the table, the way they seemed to be studying me, almost like an experiment. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't imagination. It was real. People still question me, but I stand by my story. I was abducted. And I believe they chose me for a reason I still don't fully understand. Even now, every time I look at the night sky, I wonder if they'll come back.